Welcome back everyone to the weekly mailbox, your weekly chance to ask me questions about absolutely anything you like. Could be Formula 1, Formula E, motorsport in general, or absolutely anything in between. This week, as always, we have got 5 fantastic questions submitted by the viewers at home over on Instagram, YouTube and on Twitter. So links for that will be in the description and on screen. You know the drill by now, most of you. However, actually, there's quite a few of you new to the team this week, so if this is your first weekly mailbox, welcome. And yes, I scroll through all the comments. I'm always looking for the best ones. Enough messing around. Let's jump in to question 1, and it comes from Uno_Juno. Will Kimi Raikkonen move to another team or retire with Alfa Romeo? Will he go beyond 2020? I really like this one because, crikey, when he retired, well, his first retirement back at the end of 2009, I don't think many of us expected him to return to Formula 1. Obviously, there was that shock comeback with Lotus for those couple of years, then to Ferrari, and then, I don't know this for sure, but I feel at around 2017, I was starting to think to myself, any time now, Raikkonen could be calling it quits on Formula 1. He's had a brilliant career, seems to not really be the main man at Ferrari. That was an understatement. Really wasn't the main man at Ferrari. Was really moulding into that number 2 driver, which was brilliant for Ferrari, but I just kind of felt for Kimi a little bit, thinking, I hope he can get a victory, which he eventually did at the end of 2018. 2019, I was very, very surprised to hear he would be driving for Alfa Romeo, and part of me also felt that maybe he might not see out those 2 years with Alfa Romeo. He might just do 1 year and say, yeah, that was a nice little end to my career and move on. But he's staying for this 2 years, and you know what? You're kind of alluding to it in your question. Could he stay beyond 2020? I wouldn't completely rule it out, to be totally honest with you. First of all, for Kimi, I think this season with Alfa Romeo has gone really well. When you consider, there were lots of variables why he left Ferrari, the biggest being Charles Leclerc coming up through the youth systems. But for Raikkonen himself, moving into that midfield battle, away from the limelight a little bit. Come on, he's Kimi Raikkonen, a fan favourite. He's not going to completely get away from it, but not so much scrutiny and coverage from the media. Something that Raikkonen historically despises is media content. You can get some really good interviews with Raikkonen. Some of the things that WTF1 were able to do over the last couple of years I've really enjoyed, and Sky Sports and Channel 4 as well, to be fair, but he's not a fan. Is Raikkonen. So moving into that midfield, taking that pressure away off the circuit, but on the circuit, he's been really good getting involved in some brilliant midfield fights this year. Recency bias, the end of the season wasn't fantastic, but when you consider the entire year, that first half was brilliant. It really was. And him just getting his elbows out, really giving it a go, that Kimi of old coming back, was brilliant to see. So I'm chuffed he's staying for 2020. But beyond that, that's where it gets tricky. Because I think for Kimi himself, what's brilliant about Alfa Romeo is it's close to home, which we all know a lot of the drivers, when they start to get families, that's when they start to question whether they should retire. Totally makes sense. So for Raikkonen, kind of staying within that Ferrari family, a little bit closer to home, a fairly competitive car, at least in the midfield anyway, makes sense. So to move elsewhere seems a little bit silly, even, in my opinion, to go back to a top team. I don't think that's what Raikkonen's looking for in Formula 1. He's been a world champion, he's had victories, he's had podiums. I think he's just looking for that thrill factor, still to be able to race properly, which doesn't happen as often at the front as it does in the midfield. Would he go to another midfield team? I don't think it quite makes sense. From a team's perspective, and kind of what makes me think the team Alfa Romeo should keep Kimi Raikkonen for at least 1 more year, is his experience. He's been able to teach Giovinazzi so much in this 1 year of Formula 1. His progression has been insane from where he was in Melbourne to where he was at the end of the year. So if Gio stays, maybe Alfa Romeo will move Raikkonen on and hope that Gio has learned enough to lead the team. But if they decide that he's not quite good enough and they decide to promote a Robert Schwartzman, a Mick Schumacher, maybe having that driver like Kimi Raikkonen at the team could be really valuable for them. So that'll be really interesting to see what the team play with, what Ferrari decide to do with their kind of seat they've got Bagsy taxed at Alfa Romeo. But to answer the question, will he retire? I think he will. I do think this will be Raikkonen's last season. I think Sauber or Alfa Romeo, oh God, Sauber. Whoa, that's I've had plenty of time to get used to that. Alfa Romeo would love to keep him, and I think they'll try to keep him, but I just feel Kimi, I want him to stay. I really do. I'll leave that there. I think he will retire, but I hope he doesn't. I think it's the best way of putting it. Moving on to question 2 comes from Ben Hamlock. Would you recommend the Autosport International show for next year? Didn't get a chance to go this year, but it looks amazing. Thank you for your question, Ben. It was pretty good. It was better than pretty good. I went last year. I went in 2019 for the very first time. I didn't really know what to expect. And if I'm totally honest, I'd never heard of it. Got to come clean, I had never heard of the Autosport show. And it was Sean, the F1 Word, that had told me about it. I thought, yeah, it might be fun to go and check out and go along to. And it really was. And I suppose it all depends on what you're going for. But I think for me, it's one of those real opportunities to feel part of the F1 community, you know, to meet up with some of the other guys within or doing YouTube, but also some of you guys as well. I got to meet a handful of you at the show as well, and being able to do that, it's pretty cool. You know, I don't live in London or a big city or anything, so I'm usually quite out the way, and I am a bit of a sucker for things like Comic-Con and stuff. I've never been to any, I really haven't, but this really is the motorsport equivalent. So if you live near Birmingham or just fancy a day out in January next year, I think it's the 14th, something like that. I think it begins the 14th next year. Get up and personal with some of the cars. Attempt to meet some of the drivers as well. Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris were the 2 star guests this year. Formula E's getting a bigger presence, which puts a smile on my face, but we have all of the Formula 1 teams, mini helmets. Some of you know how much I love my mini helmet collections. There's all sorts of crazy stands like that. It's just a brilliant day. And I've never been able to do the full weekend because I'm currently at university, so kind of trying to balance that out is a little bit difficult with exams and whatnot. But I don't want to focus on this one too long, but I do really recommend it. I personally really enjoy it, and it's just something completely different. It's not expensive as a Grand Prix weekend. I mean, it's not as good as a Grand Prix weekend, but it's just to feel part of the motorsport community, if that makes sense. So yeah, buddy, if you can get the time, if you have a spare weekend, if you can, I mean, it's not expensive to get in. Yeah, totally worth it. Thank you for your question, mate. Moving on to question 3, Mr. Tuned asks, do you think it is possible for drivers like Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel to retire from Formula 1 and move to Formula E? Big question. Big question asking me about Hamilton and Vettel retiring, and I am sure this will be one that keeps cropping up in the mailbox for the next couple of years. Might just be this year, but I imagine for the next couple of years this will be one that people are curious about, and I get it. Formula E, though, that's where I really want to focus on this question. We've had a previous Formula 1 world champion in Formula E, Jacques Villeneuve, but does he really count? No, I don't think so. I think, from my point of view anyway, I think it's a very personal question for each individual driver. Formula E as a sport is definitely growing in pedigree each single year. The calibre of driver is growing every single year. We've got drivers like Nick de Vries that a lot of people feel deserves a place in Formula 1. He's had to go to Formula E, so I don't think he would have been a potential Formula 1 champion. But will it get to that stage where, let's say, Charles Leclerc was in Formula 2, won it like he did, but there wasn't a space in Formula 1, and we get him going over to Formula E and the calibre goes up that way? Or will it be ex-Formula 1 drivers, which is kind of what's currently happening at the moment, ex-Formula 1 drivers going over to Formula E and raising the profile that way? I mean, Hamilton, when do I think he'll retire from Formula 1? I don't think for a few years, to be totally honest. And I know some people are adamant he will leave at the end of this season, but I definitely think Hamilton would love to try out the 2021 cars. And I kind of feel the same for Sebastian Vettel as well. I feel that'd be a really good opportunity for him to prove himself in 2021. And he's got to do the job this year, of course, Sebastian Vettel. But if they do retire, Formula E... I mean, I might be a bit biased because I really love Formula E, but I definitely think is the next best thing. You could also put out arguments for IndyCar. I think also that's a very strong series, and it's something a little bit different from Formula 1. I think that's potentially, if a driver's retiring from Formula 1, they're not doing it because they don't think they're good enough. They're doing it because they want to try something new. They're doing it because they want to start a family. They want to try a completely different series. So maybe for some drivers, that's not a big enough change to move to Formula E. I know it's street circuits, I know it's electric, but it's still single-seaters. The circuits aren't too dissimilar. Some people will say it's completely black and white, Formula 1 and Formula E circuits, but I do think there's a fair bit of crossover. The cars aren't too dissimilar in the grand scheme of things, so hey, if a driver's looking for a shorter calendar, the likes of Kimi Raikkonen perhaps, wants a shorter calendar, maybe still wants to keep racing, maybe a team can be able to splash out a bit of money to bring in an ex-Formula 1 world champion, makes sense. I've said before I think Fernando Alonso would be brilliant in Formula E, considering he's trying to get his triple crown. Why not add Formula E to your calibre and your roster? I can see drivers going there. To answer the question, I know it's kind of more skewed to Hamilton and Vettel. Hamilton, I think, would be the more likely of the two, but I really feel Lewis Hamilton could do another 10 years in Formula 1. I really do. He might not want to. He might personally decide that he's had enough, but I feel if Hamilton decides he's had enough, he will just stop racing for a bit. A little bit like Rosberg did. That's kind of what I see with Lewis Hamilton. Sebastian Vettel is a very closed book. We really don't know a lot about him. He's not on social media. There's very little information about him out there. So I really don't know what Sebastian would do. But I don't see him. I see him also doing Formula 1 for as long as possible and then completely stopping racing. He's a family man as well, so that's probably a big priority for him. Question 4 comes from Celtic Blues. Would Ricciardo... I did enjoy this one. I do have to come clean. This one gave me a little chuckle. Would Ricciardo's clowning around off the track be enough to keep him out of a seat at Mercedes or Ferrari? As a point of contrast, Hamilton and Leclerc are very conservative by comparison. What a completely unique take on this situation, and I like this one. If you haven't seen on the channel, I think it was about a week ago now, we discussed about the future of Daniel Ricciardo, his first year at Renault, and his potential future prospects. And I tell you what, this train of thought never ever crossed my mind, because I personally feel a driver like Ricciardo, who's got a fantastic personality, isn't afraid to speak his mind, gets along with most people, at least from a media perspective. So for me, that's a brilliant person to have in the team. It really is. Better than someone who isn't going to speak a lot and isn't a character. Again, that's not a dig at Kimi Raikkonen, because he really is a character, very marketable. I need to tread carefully here. But I think Ricciardo, those qualities, that personality is so strong, it's only a benefit. So now questioning whether it's a benefit at all is quite cool. I suppose it's got potential. You know, Red Bull are historically quite a laid-back team. Of course, the whole point of Red Bull Formula 1 is a big sponsorship, in reality, to sell energy drinks. They're in multiple sports, and none of them generally are pretty safe. Most of them are extreme sports, some of the most daring characters. So a driver like Ricciardo fitted in really well. Renault, to me, is one of the more corporate teams on the grid. And the fact that Ricciardo fits in so well there would suggest to me that his personality wouldn't really block a move to Mercedes. Ferrari, potentially a little bit different, but I personally feel his ability is what matters the most. And whilst Daniel is a cheeky chappy, I believe, I believe this was on the Beyond the Grid podcast. He grew up in Italy and he knows a lot of Italian, so I think that in itself, to be able to present that personality in multiple languages potentially as well, especially with Ferrari, yeah, that wouldn't be a big issue for me. But I did want to include that one because I like those one that make you think out the box a little bit. And our final question, and if you're new around here, don't worry, I will inform you that question number 5, our final question, is audience participation. So it's your chance to give me an answer as well. So put it in the comments below. This question comes from Tapasaya. Who is going to shake up the silly season this summer? My take is Daniel Ricciardo, but what is your opinion? Spicy one, a real spicy one. And yes, I want to know your thoughts. I want to hear your craziest theories in the comments below. But I think I am going to go with... I don't know if this is a bit of a... not a cop-out, but I think this will be a popular answer. I think it's a better way of putting it. I think Sebastian Vettel. I really do. He's got a massive challenge on his hands this year to wrestle back power within that Ferrari team. And I don't necessarily think he's lost it totally yet. I think Ferrari's intention with Leclerc's long-term deal definitely is cause for concern for Sebastian. And yeah, he could stay at Ferrari alongside Leclerc if they iron out a few issues that occurred over the course of the 2019 season. But I don't think it was as dramatic a breakup and a relationship as some people think it was. I still think they get on fine. But if anyone's going to shake up the transfer market, I just feel a Vettel moving on from Ferrari. Again, I don't think he'll retire just yet, but maybe moving back to Red Bull, maybe even replacing Raikkonen at Alfa Romeo, going to Renault, something like that. Yeah, I'm going to go with Sebastian Vettel. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. You can answer the audience question, but you can also answer any of the questions. And of course, you can send me your own questions in the comments below. Almost forgot what I usually say there. I've done this enough by now, I should know. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you're new around here, feel free to subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one.